Nobody expected this playoff game to be remembered for a press conference. Not the snow, not the turnovers, not even the win itself. Yet within minutes of the final whistle, one short moment from Drake Maye sent the internet into a frenzy, and it had nothing to do with trash talk, controversy, or calling anyone out. It was something far more unexpected, honest, slightly uncomfortable, and way more revealing than any stat line. This was supposed to be a routine post-game breakdown, whether talk, defense praise, move on to the next round. But instead, Maye casually pulled back the curtain on what it's really like playing quarterback under Mike Vrabel, and fans weren't ready for it. Because what he described wasn't yelling, it wasn't chaos, it wasn't some fiery locker room speech designed for cameras, it was pressure without noise, authority without theatrics, the kind that makes you laugh for half a second then immediately straighten up. And that's why this moment hit so hard. At just 23 years old, Maye had every excuse to deflect. The conditions were brutal, the mistakes were real, the margin for error was razor thin. Most young quarterbacks would have leaned on cliches or blamed the elements. Instead, he did the opposite, and in doing so, revealed something deeper about the culture forming inside the New England Patriots. This wasn't about going viral, it wasn't about jokes, and it definitely wasn't planned. It was a glimpse into a quarterback still learning how to lead, still absorbing hard coaching, and still finding his footing, all while guiding his team deeper into the playoffs than anyone expected. And once you understand the context behind that moment, the snow, the turnovers, and even the win itself start to feel secondary. Because what really unfolded wasn't just a playoff victory. It was the quiet reveal of a team's identity and a quarterback growing into something much bigger than the box score. And that's where this story really begins. At first glance, this game felt like the kind of night that usually ends a season. Snow swirling sideways, wind cutting through the stadium, the ball slick enough to betray even the most careful grip. This wasn't just bad weather, this was classic New England playoff chaos, the kind that turns simple plays into survival tests. And in the middle of it all stood Drake Maye, just 23 years old, making his first real push into the postseason spotlight. That alone raised eyebrows. Young quarterbacks aren't supposed to thrive in games like this. They're supposed to struggle, force throws, lose control, and eventually get overwhelmed by the moment. Especially when everything around them feels hostile. The cold, the noise, the pressure, and the weight of expectations that come with wearing a Patriots jersey in January. And for stretches of this game, it looked like the script was following that exact path. The execution wasn't clean, the rhythm was uneven. Mistakes crept in at moments where there was no room for them. On paper, this didn't resemble the kind of performance that sends a team to the next round of the playoffs. In most stadiums, under most circumstances, this would have been the beginning of a slow unravel. But somehow that unraveling never came. Despite the chaos, the scoreboard never truly tilted away from New England Patriots. Every time momentum threatened to shift, it stalled. Every time the game felt like it might swing, New England steadied itself. That's what made this win so confusing and so revealing. Because playoff football isn't about looking perfect, it's about surviving moments that should break you. This wasn't a game where everything clicked. It was a game where things went wrong repeatedly, and yet the Patriots stayed in control. That contradiction is where the story really begins, not with dominance but with durability, not with clean execution but with composure when the conditions refuse to cooperate. For a team still labeled as rebuilding, this performance didn't feel fragile. It felt grounded, it felt prepared for discomfort, and that's what made it dangerous. This win didn't make sense if you only look at the surface. But when you zoom out, it starts to tell a different story, one about identity, confidence, and a young quarterback learning how to navigate chaos without losing himself inside it. And the deeper you look, the clearer it becomes. This wasn't just a playoff win. It was a warning sign that something in New England is coming together faster than anyone expected. And what happened next only made that realization impossible to ignore. This is the part of the game where seasons usually end. Not with a dramatic final drive or a last-second kick, but with mistakes that quietly pile up until there's no way back. And for Drake Maye, those moments came early and often. The football was slick. Every exchange felt risky, every scramble carried danger, and when the ball hit the ground, it wasn't just a minor setback. It was the kind of error that flips playoff games instantly. Fumbles in January don't just hurt momentum, they rewrite outcomes, they fuel criticism, dominate replays, and linger long after the final whistle. By the numbers alone, this was a nightmare scenario. Multiple fumbles, possessions handed away. The exact mistakes young quarterbacks are warned about from the moment they enter the league. In most playoff environments, 1 or 2 of those is enough to send a team home. 4, that's usually a death sentence. And yet something strange happened. The game never spiraled. There was no visible panic, no pressing, no forced hero ball trying to make up for earlier errors. Maye didn't suddenly start playing faster or riskier. He didn't let frustration leak into his decisions. Instead, the response was calm, almost stubbornly so. That's what made this stretch so telling. Mistakes didn't change the way New England Patriots played. They didn't abandon their plan. They didn't lose their composure. Each possession after a miscue felt controlled, as if the scoreboard, not the stat sheet, was the only thing anyone cared about. That's rare. Most young quarterbacks tighten up after turnovers. You can see it in their feet, their eyes, their timing, everything speeds up. But here, even with the errors stacking up, Maye stayed grounded. The huddle didn't shrink, the offense didn't drift, and most importantly, the belief inside the team never cracked. This wasn't about ignoring the mistakes. Accountability was there. But so was trust that the game was still winnable, and trust that one bad moment didn't need to turn into 5. That's the difference between mistakes that end seasons and mistakes that get absorbed. This game should have flipped. The margin for error said it would, history said it would, logic said it would, but it didn't, and that's where the story changes. Because surviving errors like this in the postseason isn't luck, it's composure under pressure. It's a team refusing to let chaos dictate its identity. And once that becomes clear, the focus shifts away from what went wrong and toward why nothing collapsed when it mattered most. And that leads directly to what kept this game firmly in New England's control. What made this game different wasn't the absence of mistakes. It was the absence of panic. Even as turnovers piled up and conditions worsened, New England Patriots never looked rattled. The sidelines stayed composed. The huddle stayed calm, and most importantly, the game never slipped out of their hands even when logic said it should have. That starts with the scoreboard. No matter how ugly certain sequences looked, New England stayed ahead, and when you're still winning in January, everything changes. Decisions slow down, emotions stay in check, urgency doesn't turn into desperation. The team understands that the clock is still their ally, not their enemy. That awareness showed up everywhere. After each mistake, the response wasn't chaos, it was correction. No dramatic overhauls, no frantic play calling, no visible frustration spilling onto the field. The plan stayed intact and everyone trusted it enough to stick with it. That's not accidental, that's preparation meeting pressure. For Drake Maye, that environment mattered. Young quarterbacks often unravel when they feel like they have to fix everything themselves. That's when risky throws appear, when timing disappears, when the game speeds up. But here, the structure around him never collapsed, so he didn't either. The defense set that tone early. Every stop reinforced the idea that mistakes weren't fatal. Every takeaway reset momentum. Every 3-and-out quietly reminded the offense that they didn't need to chase perfection, they just needed to stay steady. That kind of support changes how a quarterback carries himself. It turns pressure into patience. And patience wins playoff games. There was no sense that New England was surviving by luck. They were surviving by discipline. They trusted that if they stayed aligned, stayed physical, and stayed composed, the game would tilt back in their favor. And it did over and over again. This is where leadership shows itself. Not in speeches, not in celebrations, but in moments where nothing visibly changes because everyone understands what's required. That clarity is rare, especially for a team still labeled as young or rebuilding. But nothing about this performance felt fragile. It felt like a team comfortable being uncomfortable. A team that understood January football isn't about controlling the environment, it's about controlling your response to it. That's why the mistakes didn't define the night, and that's why the conversation shifted after the game. Because once people realized New England never panicked, attention naturally moved to the source of that calm and the moment that unexpectedly revealed exactly how this team is being led. By the time the final whistle blew, most people thought they already knew the story. Tough weather, defensive dominance, a young quarterback surviving a messy night, the usual playoff script. So when Drake Maye stepped up to the podium, expectations were low. Another round of safe answers, credit the defense, mention the conditions, move on. That's not what happened. At first, everything sounded normal, respectful, focused. He talked about preparation, discipline, and the importance of staying composed. He gave credit where it was due, nothing that would make headlines, nothing that would light up social media. And then almost casually, the tone shifted. When Maye started talking about Mike Vrabel, the words didn't feel rehearsed. They didn't feel polished. They felt real. He described the way Vrabel communicates with him, not loudly, not emotionally, but with a kind of sharp, intimidating sarcasm that makes you want to laugh and immediately stop yourself. That was the moment. You could see it on Maye's face. The half smile, the slight hesitation, the realization that he just said something you don't usually hear out loud in an NFL press conference. It wasn't disrespectful, it wasn't critical, but it was honest in a way players usually avoid on camera. And the internet caught it instantly. Because fans aren't used to seeing quarterbacks admit they feel that kind of pressure. They're not used to hearing a young player describe his head coach as someone whose presence alone changes the air in the room. No yelling, no theatrics, just an unspoken demand that everyone lock in. That authenticity is why the clip exploded. It wasn't about sarcasm, it was about vulnerability. It was about a 23-year-old quarterback openly acknowledging that he's still learning how to operate under a coach who doesn't need to raise his voice to command respect. In a league full of robotic answers and media-trained sound bites, this felt different. It felt unfiltered, and that's what made people stop scrolling. Because suddenly the story wasn't just about a playoff win. It was about the dynamic shaping the New England Patriots from the inside, a quarterback being pushed, a coach setting a tone, and a relationship built on pressure, trust, and accountability. That one quote didn't go viral because it was funny. It went viral because it revealed something real. And once that door opened, fans started paying attention to what it said about the future, not just of Maye, but of the entire organization. What Mike Vrabel brings to this team can't be measured by play sheets or sideline reactions. It's not loud, it's not flashy, and it doesn't rely on theatrics. It's something far more unsettling for players' presence. When Vrabel walks into a room, the temperature changes. Conversations quiet down, postures shift. Players sit up straighter without being told to, not because they're afraid of being embarrassed, but because they know exactly what's expected. That kind of authority doesn't need reminders, it's already understood. That's what made Drake Maye's comments resonate so deeply. He wasn't describing a coach who motivates with speeches or explodes when things go wrong. He was describing a coach who applies pressure simply by standing there, arms crossed, eyes locked in, waiting for you to hold yourself to the standard he's already set. That's rare in today's NFL. Many coaches lean too far in one direction. Some push so hard that players shut down. Others soften expectations to maintain relationships. Vrabel operates in the narrow space between those extremes. He demands accountability without humiliating anyone. He challenges players without stripping confidence. And when mistakes happen, the message isn't panic, it's correction. That balance is why his words carry weight. For a young quarterback, that environment can be overwhelming. Every look feels like a test. Every conversation feels meaningful. But instead of shrinking under that pressure, Maye is absorbing it. He's learning how to process criticism without internalizing failure, how to stay composed when the coaching gets sharp, how to separate emotion from execution. That's development happening in real time. Inside the New England Patriots locker room, this approach has created something subtle but powerful. Players aren't guessing where they stand. Expectations are clear, effort is non-negotiable, and accountability doesn't disappear after a win. That's why mistakes don't spiral, that's why nobody panics. Vrabel doesn't need to raise his voice to make his point. His silence does more work than most speeches ever could. And when a 23-year-old quarterback openly admits that he sometimes doesn't know whether to laugh or lock in when his coach speaks, that tells you everything about the environment he's growing in. This isn't fear-based leadership, it's respect-driven pressure. And that pressure is shaping more than one game plan. It's shaping habits, responses, and identities. It's turning uncomfortable moments into learning moments, and in January, that edge matters. Because when the lights get brighter and the margin gets thinner, teams led by presence do fold. They tighten up and keep moving forward. What made this moment explode online wasn't controversy. It wasn't trash talk. And it definitely wasn't manufactured drama. It was authenticity, something NFL fans rarely get anymore. When Maye spoke about his head coach, he didn't sound like someone reciting media-trained lines. He sounded like a young quarterback thinking out loud, choosing his words carefully and realizing in real time that he was being honest on camera. That hesitation, that half-smile, that slight nervous laugh, fans noticed all of it. And that's why people stopped scrolling. In a league where most press conferences blur together, this one felt different. There were no buzzwords stacked on top of each other. No safe cliches about 1 week at a time. Instead, viewers saw a player navigating pressure, respect, and growth all at once. That's relatable even if you've never stepped onto a football field. Fans aren't just watching for highlights anymore, they're watching for moments that feel real. This clip didn't feel like it was meant to go viral. It felt accidental, and accidental moments carry more weight than anything scripted. People could tell Maye wasn't trying to impress anyone. He wasn't trying to create a headline. He was simply describing what it feels like to be coached hard while still figuring things out. That honesty resonated across platforms. On TikTok, fans replayed the clip because it felt human. On Twitter, people quoted it because it revealed something deeper about leadership. On Instagram, it spread because it showed vulnerability without weakness. The reactions weren't about jokes, they were about respect. And that's the key difference. Maye didn't come across as rattled. He came across as aware that he's still learning, aware that pressure is part of the job, and aware that growth isn't always comfortable. That kind of self-awareness is rare, especially from a quarterback this young, playing for a franchise with expectations as heavy as the New England Patriots. Fans connected because they weren't being sold a finished product. They were watching someone in the middle of the process. That's powerful. In a sport obsessed with confidence and certainty, Maye showed something quieter, composure mixed with humility. He didn't pretend to have everything figured out. He didn't hide behind polished answers. He let the moment breathe. And that's why it stuck. Because when fans feel like they're seeing the real person behind the helmet, the connection goes deeper than wins or stats. It becomes about belief that this quarterback and this team are building something genuine. And once that connection forms, it doesn't fade quickly. What makes this moment truly stand out isn't the quote itself. It's what it reveals about who Maye is becoming in real time. Most quarterbacks this young are still trying to project confidence. They speak in absolutes. They hide uncertainty. They lean on rehearsed answers because they think that's what leadership looks like. Maye did the opposite. He showed awareness not just of the situation but of himself. He knows he's not a finished product. That's rare. In the same breath that he acknowledged winning, he admitted he's still learning how to handle the pressure, the tone, and the intensity that come with being coached hard at the highest level. He didn't frame it as a complaint. He didn't frame it as a joke. He framed it as part of the process, uncomfortable, demanding, but necessary. That mindset matters more than arm strength or highlight throws. Because this league doesn't break quarterbacks physically. It breaks them mentally. It overwhelms them with expectations, scrutiny, and moments where nothing feels under control. And in this game, brutal weather, costly mistakes, playoff stakes, Maye never lost himself inside the chaos. Even with the fumbles, even with the imperfections, his presence stayed steady. His body language didn't unravel. His voice didn't change. He didn't start chasing redemption plays. That tells you everything about where his foundation already is. This wasn't a quarterback pretending the pressure didn't exist. This was a quarterback acknowledging it and stepping into it anyway. What fans responded to wasn't confidence without cracks. It was confidence built with them. The understanding that leadership doesn't mean having all the answers. Sometimes it means showing you're willing to be coached, corrected, and pushed without flinching. That's growth. Inside the New England Patriots locker room, that kind of self-awareness travels fast. Teammates trust quarterbacks who own their mistakes and don't let them define the moment. Coaches trust quarterbacks who can handle hard feedback without shrinking. And organizations build around quarterbacks who understand that winning doesn't erase flaws, it exposes what still needs work. Maye is showing all of that at once. This moment wasn't about being funny or relatable. It was about maturity, about a young quarterback recognizing that discomfort is part of becoming great and not running from it. He's not trying to be perfect. He's trying to be prepared. And that distinction is exactly why this feels less like a hot streak and more like the beginning of something real. This was never just about one playoff win. It wasn't about the snow, the turnovers, or even the viral press conference moment that took over social media. Those were just the surface details. What really unfolded was something deeper, a team revealing who it is under pressure, and a quarterback showing exactly how he plans to grow into the weight of expectations. For Drake Maye, this game marked a turning point, not because everything went right, but because plenty went wrong and nothing collapsed. That's the difference between a talented quarterback and a foundational one. Anyone can shine when conditions are perfect. Very few can stay composed when the margin for error disappears. The stat line will always look messy. It always will. But playoff football has never been about clean numbers. It's about surviving discomfort, trusting the people around you, and making enough plays when the pressure peaks. And that's exactly what happened here. The same goes for the larger picture in New England. For years, the New England Patriots have been searching for an identity after losing the one they were known for. This win didn't magically solve everything, but it did confirm something important. This team isn't fragile. It isn't afraid of hard coaching. And it isn't shrinking when things get ugly. That comes from leadership. From a coach like Mike Vrabel, who doesn't need theatrics to command attention. And from a quarterback willing to admit he's still learning while carrying his team deeper into the postseason than most expected. That combination matters more than any single highlight or viral clip. Now the stage only gets louder. The Patriots head on the road. The crowd gets hostile. The pressure multiplies, and the margin for error tightens even further. But after watching how this team responded to chaos, mistakes, and discomfort, one question lingers over the entire AFC. Is this team ahead of schedule? No one is handing out championships yet. No one is calling this a dynasty. But something is clearly forming, a foundation built on accountability, composure, and trust. A quarterback who isn't pretending to have all the answers, a coach who demands standards without breaking confidence, and a locker room that responds instead of reacts. That's why this moment mattered. Not because it was funny, not because it went viral, but because it revealed who this team is becoming when the lights are brightest. This wasn't the end of a story, it felt like the beginning of one. And if Drake Maye keeps making enough plays when it matters, not perfect ones, just enough, something much bigger may be unfolding in New England sooner than anyone expected.